Hey fellow tankers, it's Mobius Y here with another video for World of Tanks console. Today's video is actually not going to have any gameplay in it, as it's simply another discussion video. I know, they're totally your guys' favorite kind of videos, right? Don't answer that. Anyways, today's video I'm actually going to be going over an article that was originally posted on the World of Tanks PC forums, but many years ago somebody had the goodwill and smarts to share it with the World of Tanks console community on those forums as well. If you would like to read this article after I go through it here on your own time, there will be a link in the description below if you would like to read it on your own time. It's simply titled The Ruthless Math of World of Tanks, and it was an article written up by somebody that I'm going to just refer to as Zinegata. It's a really useful thing to understand, and it's a really handy concept to get into your mind to help give you a better mentality of how you want to play World of Tanks, and by extension World of Tanks console, to eke out a higher win rate or just simply play better overall. Now, normally, if you read this on your own, there are no images in the article itself. It is strictly text only. So for this video, I've gone ahead and used my awesome MS Paint skills to make some visual aids to help you better understand and comprehend what is being said from this article. And on that note, there are some errors within the article itself in terms of both grammatical as to what's being explained, what's going on, as well as some errors in calculations, and I've corrected them in the images that I put up there. So if there is a slight discrepancy in what I'm saying, because I am simply reading off of what's on my screen here and what is being shown in the MS Paint images that pop up on your screen that I put into this video, the images are 100% accurate to reflect what is actually going on and what would happen in certain circumstances. You'll understand what I mean as we get further along in this video. So hopefully this will give you some insight into further mentality to better yourself at World of Tanks. So without further being said, prepare your brains and let's jump right into this. The Ruthless Math of World of Tanks. One of the major debates that rage in the forums is the ability of a single player to affect the entire course of the match. In general, the consensus is that a single tank can in fact affect the course of an entire match, often termed as a quote-unquote carry. However, the problem with this debate is that it invariably boils down to what I call win rate makes me right argument. We have some players who play solo and yet have very high win rates. Ergo, it is possible to carry a team all by yourself because the high win rates cannot simply be explained by luck. The problem with this approach is that it does very little to actually explain how such carries are actually possible. Often we just get some pretty vague and often bordering on mythical explanations, usually centering around skill. This thread attempts to answer the how. It will not be a discussion about skill or tactics, although it will reveal why some tactics are so vital. It will instead simply show the unbending gaming principles behind how World of Tanks battles actually work, the ruthless math of the game, so if you will. The key concept, the hit point mechanic and critical existence failure. To begin to understand the math of the game, however, one crucial concept needs to be understood by the reader: critical existence failure, henceforth abbreviated as CEF. And yes, I'm using the TV tropes terminology because it's more fun this way. Basically, CEF is the model used by most games that use the hit point mechanic. Under this model, a unit can function at same level regardless if it was at full hit points or if it was down to just one hit point. In World of Tanks, it means a Sherman tank at one hit point will still deal as much damage as a Sherman at full health. And yes, I'm ignoring the module damage factor for now. See the sidebar below. What this means is that a one hit point Sherman tank can potentially remain as effective as a Sherman with full hit points. In fact, if the Sherman at full HP is an utterly bad player whose shots keep missing or keep hitting spots that will just bounce the shell, it is entirely possible for a 1 HP Sherman to utterly demolish one at full health. I'm sure that most good players have done this one time or another, and it should already serve as an indication of how superior player knowledge, quote-unquote skill, can lead to a decisive difference on the field. Sidebar: the contrasting approach to CEF is called subsystem damage, implemented in games like Banner Saga, wherein your ability to inflict damage decreases as you take more damage. And to an extent, World of Tanks is a bit of a hybrid because module damage, especially ammo racks, can severely affect your damage dealing ability. This analysis largely glosses over this, however, since module damage can often be repaired with consumables anyway, and it's entirely possible to be brought to 0 HP in this game without suffering module damage at all. The myth of 15 versus 15. However, in reality, most matches are not won by a 1 hit point Sherman dueling a full hit point Sherman to death. Many will in fact point out that matches involve 15 tanks on both sides. Cue boo-hooing about how one tank can't carry 14 others. But in reality, matches are not actually grand battles of 15 versus 15. Instead, most matches are actually a series of smaller, sometimes interrelated fights, which I will term as skirmishes, with often just 2 to 4 tanks of either side fighting for a particular section of the map. As an example, take your average Lakefield battle. Let's assume there's 2 arty per side and relatively competent players on both sides. Each team will probably send 2 to 4 tanks into the valley, 1 to 2 tanks into the middle, and the remainder, 7 to 10, going to town. But even in the case of the town, that big group often actually gets divided into a bunch of smaller skirmishes, with some tanks going to the lakeshore, the others going to the church, and some hugging the map edge, none of which necessarily interact with each other. In fact, it is actually quite rare to see an outright slugging match involving more than 5 tanks from each side. Hence the old excuse that I'm just 1 tank out of 15 rings very hollow. You almost never actually fight 15 enemy tanks at a time at the point of contact. You will in general be fighting 2 to 4 enemy tanks, and you'll have about as many allies with you too. And really, what tends to happen in a match is that the 15-man team will win some of these skirmishes and then lose a couple of others. Your Lakeshore team might overwhelm their counterparts, but your Map Edge team might have similarly folded. Afterwards, the survivors of the respective skirmishes will make contact with each other into a series of new skirmishes, and the process is repeated until one team is wiped out. Sidebar, one of the skills lacking in many players, yet few people seem to be able to articulate, is their inability to recognize that these small localized skirmishes are actually happening. Most players will understand the valley mid-town dynamic of Lakeville, for instance, but they don't further subdivide and understand that the town actually has multiple different areas of conflict. In part, I blame the minimap for this, which tends to be rather bad at representing how these skirmishes are actually separated by buildings. The anatomy of a skirmish as dictated by critical existence failure. When people think of a 4 versus 4 match, they tend to think that it should result in a quote-unquote fair fight, wherein both sides essentially wiped each other out. And indeed, this is what sometimes happens, with only 1 or 2 badly damaged survivors emerging from the furball of 8 tanks. But the reality of most skirmishes is actually different, especially if it involves players of different skills levels. To demonstrate, let's construct a thought exercise. Let's assume we have 2 teams of 4 tanks apiece. Each tank has 450 hit points and inflicts 120 damage with each shot, so 4 shots to kill an enemy tank will be required. Let's assume both sides hit and penetrate 100% of the time. A bit unrealistic, but bear with me for this thought exercise. However, let's give Team A small but crucial advantage. Let's assume that Team A knows how to focus fire, while Team B does not. Team B's tanks will only shoot their opposite numbered tank until that tank is destroyed. Given this setup, the following will happen. At the start of the skirmish, all tanks on both teams will have 450 HP. At the first volley, all 4 tanks on Team A will only have 330 HP, while tanks on Team B will still be at full health, but the very first tank is completely destroyed. The total damage done by Team A is 450 hit points, while the total damage done by Team B is actually 480. After the second volley, 3 tanks on Team A will only have 210 hit points, while 1 tank will still have 330 hit points. The total damage Team A will have done is 900. Team B will now have 2 tanks that are destroyed and 2 tanks that are at full 450 hit points. The total damage they have done is only 840 hit points. After the third volley, the first tank on Team A still has 330 hit points, and the second tank on Team A has 210 hit points still. Tanks 3 and 4 are now down to 90 hit points. The total damage that Team A has done, though, is 1350 hit points, because the tanks on Team B 3 of them have been destroyed, while 1 of them is at 450 hit points still, and the total damage that they have done is 1,080. After the 4th volley, Team A finally loses their tank number 4, as it was only at 90 hit points. However, tank number 3 still has 90 hit points, tank number 2 still has 210 hit points, and tank number 1 still has 330 hit points. They have now inflicted 1,800 damage combined between the 4 of them. And all 4 tanks on Team B are destroyed, with the total damage being done is 1,170. This is rather different from the expectation of mutual annihilation, isn't it? Indeed, by simply focus firing, Team A was able to inflict 50% more damage than Team B, while preserving the life of 3 tanks, which can now be redeployed elsewhere for decisive effect. How did this happen? Well, I promised the math, and here it is. What we're witnessing is what is called the snowball effect, wherein something of seemingly minor importance suddenly balloons into something more dangerous and disastrous. In this case, the disaster began when Team B lost its first tank during the first volley. Because of critical resistance failure, Team B lost 25% of its firepower at this moment. Firepower that could have inflicted another 360 points of damage had Tank 1 survived to fire for the remaining 3 volleys. That's actually enough damage to destroy 2 of Team A's remaining tanks, since Tank 2 and Tank 3 have only 300 hit points remaining in total. Thus, the loss of just 1 tank was the difference between Team A winning with 3 surviving tanks instead of just 1 surviving tank. It was, in all likelihood, also the difference in winning the whole match overall. And really, if you actually take a while to look at how skirmishes develop, you'll notice this pattern often when your team is winning. After your team destroys 1 tank, the second kill comes faster, and the third even faster, until the enemy team seemingly collapses like a house of cards. It's all because each and every gun matters in these skirmishes. Once the enemy team has fewer tanks, your team is now much more able to focus fire and bring down enemy tanks in rapidity, while the enemy has much less firepower to throw back at you. So when people stress the importance of focus fire and target prioritization, listen, because the snowball effect of losing just 1 tank can cascade to victory or defeat for a specific skirmish, which in turn can win or lose an entire match. That being said, it must be noted that focus fire situations are actually pretty rare. Most players are now smart enough not to just expose themselves and let themselves be shot at by multiple players at a time. With peekaboo tactics, even skirmishes of 4 versus 4 tanks may in reality turn into 1 versus 1 engagements. Hence the need to create situations where you can rapidly kill an enemy tank, a technique which I call the isolation. One more sidebar, the above math should also demonstrate to people the utter folly of camping at the base cap. Yes, it is okay to camp at a good firing position as long as you're actually firing and dealing damage to the enemy, thus helping win some of the skirmishes. No, it is totally not okay to camp at the cap circle, where you will not be shooting at anything 90% of the time, and the remaining 10% you're just shooting at scouts when it's already too damn late. Burn this reality into your brains. Every tank matters. Deserters will be shot. A game of isolations. Isolation is the art of bringing as much firepower to bear on an enemy tank with the intent of rapidly destroying it, while at the same time preventing your own forces from being exposed to lethal fire from the enemy. As I already noted before, most players don't sit out in the open anymore shooting at each other. They'll often use cover and try to at least make themselves a harder target for the enemy. The 4 versus 4 example I showed above should not literally play out that way in real matches, hence why it's a thought exercise. What instead happens is that good players are constantly moving and maneuvering, looking for a way to create a situation where they can quickly gang up on an enemy tank without suffering much return fire, preferably only from the target tank. In fact, a well-played isolation is how skunks, where matches in which one team loses no tanks while the enemy team is wiped out, actually happen. Again, let's do the thought exercise thing, but this time with Team A doing isolations instead of focus fire. So let's pretend that Team B is split up between several buildings, and Team A is simply circling these buildings in a wolf pack and targeting the enemies 1 tank at a time. At the start, Team A has all their tanks at 450 HP, and Team B has all their tanks at 450 HP as well. After the first volley of shots, Team A's first tank only suffered 120 damage from a single shot. Team B still has 3 tanks at full health, but Tank 1 was isolated and completely destroyed in a single volley. After the second volley, 2 tanks on Team A have now lost 120 hit points and are now sitting at 330 hit points. However, Team B has had 2 tanks completely isolated and destroyed, while the remaining 2 tanks are now still sitting at 450 HP. The total damage done by Team A is 900 hit points, since they've destroyed 2 full tanks, and the total damage done by Team B is only 240, since they have only gotten off 2 shots. After the third volley, Team A has 3 tanks at 330 hit points because they've all taken a shot, and their 4th tank is still at full health. Their total damage done is 1350 because they have destroyed 3 of Team B's tanks, while they still have 1 tank at full health, and the total damage done by Team B is only 360. The tanks that have been destroyed have only gotten 1 shot off, hence the very low damage value. And after the 4th volley, all 4 tanks on Team A are down to 330 hit points, all of them having taken a shot from Team B. Their total damage done, however, is 1800 because they have destroyed all 4 tanks on Team B. And Team B's total damage done, each tank only got off 1 damaging shot for a total of 480 damage. In this case, not only did Team A come out without losing a single tank, but they inflicted more than 3 times the damage of the enemy team. And really, this is how the quote-unquote Unicums actually achieve most of their wins. It is not about some mythical quote-unquote skill requiring better gunnery or whatnot. Instead, it revolves around the ability to pick out vulnerable but important enemy tanks in the pack, rapidly destroying them, which starts a snowball effect wherein the missing damage from the destroyed tanks quickly adds up to their team's advantage. More importantly, this can be achieved outside of platooning, so long as you remain constantly aware of how the game revolves around isolation. As a final thought experiment, let's do our Team A versus Team B thing again, only this time let's assume that Tank 1 of Team A is a skilled player who knows how to focus fire. So at the very beginning of the skirmish, all 4 tanks on both teams have 100% of their hit points. Now, Team B's Tank 2 will be the focus fire target of the entire Team A, as well as the skilled player in Tank 1 for Team A. After the first volley, everybody on Team A has taken a shot, and all of their HP is now down to 330. This team has also only inflicted 480 damage against the enemy team, because they are not fully using focus fire, singling out a single tank. However, 2 players are shooting the same target. On Team B, they have 2 tanks down to 330 hit points, 1 tank that is still full health, and the focus fire target has taken 2 shots, dropping them down to 210 HP. They have also inflicted 480 total damage, because they have gotten 4 damaging shots off as well. After the second volley, all of Team A's tanks are now down to 210 HP, because each of these tanks has taken 1 shot each. They have inflicted a total of 930 damage. Team B, on the other hand, still has 1 tank at full health because he has not been shot at all. Tank 2 has been destroyed because it was the previous focus fire target. Tanks 3 and 4 have each taken 2 shots, and they are now down to 210 hit points. The total damage that Team B has done is 960, slightly higher than Team A right now, but that's only because the Tank 2 that was destroyed had 30 points less hit points than a full health tank. Team B's Tank 4 is now the new target for our skilled player, or our Unicum, who assumes that Team A's Tank 2 will now also target Team B's Tank 3. After the third volley, 3 tanks on Team A are down to 90 hit points, essentially making them one-shots. There's still 1 more tank that has 210 hit points, because their target that was shooting at them on Team B is no longer shooting at them. They have been destroyed. So they're still sitting at 210 hit points. The total damage done by Team A is 1320 at this point, because Team B now has 3 tanks destroyed. When they lost tank number 2 and their severely weakened tanks 3 and 4 became the 2 individual focus fire targets for 2 separate tanks on Team A, those 2 tanks quickly got destroyed because they were both essentially 2-shot. The total damage that Team B has now done is 1080, and they still have 1 tank at full health. We can start to see Team A finally surpassing Team B in total damage dealt this way. And after the 4th volley, Team B's Tank 1, who was still at full health, manages to destroy our skilled player in Team A's Tank 1. However, Team A still has Tank 2 at 210 hit points and Tanks 3 and 4 at 90 hit points each. Their total damage done is 1800, the total HP of all 4 of Team B's tanks. Team B's tanks, as I said, are all now destroyed, and their total damage done is 1,410. So despite Team B doing a little more damage than in the pure focus fire example, and our Unicum being the only casualty on Team A, his focus fire efforts was actually enough to make his team still do 50% more damage overall, while leaving 3 of the 4 tanks for Team A intact. Heck, if Team A's Tank 2 had shielded our Unicum from his death blow, they would all still have survived, despite being on 90 hit points each. That's still 4 guns in the game compared to just 3. Lastly, my own thoughts. In addition to the above, you can also add in spotting damage to the mix. By having one tank go out and spot, and if said spotter is unseen, you effectively gain free damage without receiving enemy fire as well. This is a huge part as to why an unseen TD and a good spotter can utterly destroy a flank, and should be your go-to plan in part of playing well. Not camping, but doing damage without getting damage in return. So in summary, the ruthless math of the game, thanks to critical existence failure and its snowball effect, revolves around the rapid destruction of enemy tanks to reduce the opposing team's firepower while preserving your own team's damage-dealing ability. Keep even your 1 HP teammates alive because they can pump out damage that is the difference between victory and defeat. Just 1 tank out of 4 knowing how to focus fire can lead to huge swings in a match. Of course, real World of Tanks matches involve much more than just the thought experiment highlighted above. It doesn't take into consideration things like tier mismatches, example a tier 6 skirmishing 2 tier 5s, nor does it account for more random things like bounces, no damage hits, or misses. The number of volleys to kill enemy tanks also isn't as neat in the game, with different tiers and different kinds of guns. But what it does show is that if everyone is playing consistently, then each tank does matter. It's time to give up on the notion that you're just 1 tank out of 15. Well, folks, that's it for the article. Hopefully Zinegata's words were able to sink in and you're able to comprehend what it is he's trying to convey with this write-up. And I do hope that the visual aids that I provided are able to help you better understand, especially the thought experiments that were going on there. As I said before, if you want to read this article on your own, it's entirely text-based. There are no images in it, so it's a lot of words and it could look like a big wall of text, but it is very handy to go through on your own time, in my personal opinion. I will put a link for it in the description below. The link will be for the post on the World of Tanks console forums, as, at least for me, I'm blocked out from reading it on the World of Tanks PC forums, where it was originally posted. So check the links in the description below if you want to read this on your own time. If you like these kind of videos, let me know in the comments below, because I feel that they're very handy in helping get players get better, especially on the mental side of World of Tanks, because let's face it, a lot of this application of skill in World of Tanks simply comes from up here. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. It really helps me out. And if you'd like to see more World of Tanks console content, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so that you are alerted every time I put out a new video. I upload a new World of Tanks console video every Friday prior to my weekly streams. As always, this has been Mobius. Well, I thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the battlefield. Happy tanking.